The criminal justice system in the United States is unfair, broken, and the rule of law is dead. Now that I have your attention, let me go into detail on just one of the ways our current system is unfair and creates an unjust society. I will be talking about the bail bond system. But first, I will be talking about how the bail process normally runs and how it's supposed to run. And then I will explain the bail bond system. So, the normal bail process looks a little something like this. So, as you can see here, the normal money bail process begins with an arrest. So, the perpetrator or suspected perpetrator gets arrested and they are booked. Then you have two options. You can either pay your bail and you are released and you are able to get your court date. You are able to, most likely, if you can afford to pay your bail right away, straight out of pocket, most likely you're able to afford a lawyer, an attorney, a private attorney that you can go and speak with and run over the fine details of your specific case. If you can't pay bail, you are stuck in jail, or you have to get a loan of sorts, and this loan is given through the bail bond system. So before I go on, I'd like to just say, if you can pay your bail, which most people can't, most people don't just have thousands of dollars sitting around to be able to pay their bail and then pay a lawyer and then still go to work and these sorts of things. But if you do pay your bail in full, then when you return to court, you are given that money directly back. So it is pretty much just an insurance policy to make sure that you actually show up to court. Now, keeping that in mind, let's talk about some of the ways that the bail bond system works and how it is unfair. Okay, so in the bail bond system, where here you can just pay your bail and get out of jail and go back to your relatively normal life until your court date, here you cannot. You are either stuck in jail or you get a bail bond and you pay 10% of what your bail is up front to the bail bonds company. Once you pay that 10%, you are put on a payment arrangement plan where you pay back the company for paying the rest of your bail. Now, if you remember, when you can pay your bail, you get that money back. When you can't, and you are put on this payment plan, you don't get your money back. However, the company itself does. The company that fronts the money for you to get out of jail gets all their money back as soon as you make an appearance in court. That has nothing to do with you, though. If you are in the position where you get a bail bond and you set up an arrangement, a payment arrangement, you still have to pay them back. So they are getting paid back twice. Many people say that this is a lot like a normal loan. However, the key difference is that when you receive a normal loan, the bank or whoever is loaning you the money does not receive their money back in full until you make your payments. Yes, there might be interest and they're making money off of it that way, but they still don't get any money back until you make a payment, until you make your payments and continue to make your payments. In this case, the bail bondsman, they already get their money back in full. They get all of the money that they put forward to get you out of jail. They get all of that back and then double or triple what they have already gotten back. While editing, I realized that you can't see this entirely clear, so I will run you through it one more time. So an arrest is made, they're booked, and then either you have two options. You can either pay or you can't pay. If you can't pay, you stay in jail. If you can pay, you get out and you're able to fund a lawyer and you're able to spend time with that lawyer. These are potential effects of not being able to pay and staying in jail. You have psychological trauma, which can also be physical trauma because jail fights do happen. Losing children. If you are the only parent of a child, then that child is either living with their grandparents at this time or they're in DCFS. Inability to practice religion. When you're in jail, you might not have everything that you need to practice a religion. Eviction. A lot of times, if you can't work, if you can't make your payments, you are evicted. Lose your job. Again, if you can't work, you will be terminated and you won't have a job. A lot of jobs like to do things like firing people who have only been arrested, no conviction necessary, and then possibility of death. I will now explain who gets bail set for high amounts and who gets bail set for low amounts or no bail at all. Statistically, black men have their bail set for exorbitant amounts. Also, statistically, black men are more likely to be in lower class brackets than white men. However, we see the complete opposite happen where white men are often let off, get good plea deals, and are not even having to pay a bail, where black men are often having to pay bail and often having to pay very high bails. Regardless, we see that even if bails were exactly even, a rich person would have way more resources behind them to be able to pay their bail and to be able to get a lawyer. If you are poor, you are not able to pay your bail, so you have to set up yourself for this payment plan with exorbitant interest rates, and it continues to make you stay in this lower tax bracket and this lower income bracket because you have to pay back this bail. And by the way, you have to pay it back even if you go to jail. So even if you're unable to work, that goes down to your family. They're gonna have to be able to pay it. Which in many cases they cannot. In many cases, because bail is set so high, people are forced to stay in jail. Being forced to stay in jail has many effects on a person, from both psychological and physical trauma to losing their children, being evicted from their homes, not being able to practice their religion, and a loss of job. These things can be shown here. But there's one major thing that is left off of that slide. A huge part of being able to get out of jail is the fact that you can go to a lawyer. You can seek out help and you can go over every detail of your situation with a lawyer. If you are in jail, if you cannot even afford to pay to go home, you are much less likely to be able to afford a very high quality lawyer. This being said, other lawyers can be just as good, but they will not take the same time on your case as a private lawyer would, because they simply don't have it. They don't have that time because they have to move on to 5, 6, 12 other cases that they have in the same jail where they have to meet all these other people. So you have a lawyer who's strapped for time and can't really devote enough time to your case, So they can't sit down and hear all the details of your case. They can't sit down and go through your story with a fine comb and make sure that every little thing is perfect for a trial or a hearing. Whereas if you can pay and you're out and you can sit down and you can talk to them and you can gather things together, that's a huge advantage, and it kind of goes against uh, what the rule of law is. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I am simply explaining why this is unfair to begin with. This is also unfair because even though some might say, well, if they earned money, they can afford to do things that obviously people who don't have the money can't afford to do. Well, this is true in most aspects of life. If you have a better job, you can get a better car, you can get a better house, you can afford to have a maid clean instead of you having to clean. You can afford to have your kid in a private school instead of having to go to a public school. You can afford tutors for your children. You can afford fancy foods. In most cases, having the money is perfectly fine. If you have the money and you have the means to afford things and luxuries, that is fine. However, in the legal system and obeying by the rule of law, that is not how a legal system should work. A legal system should hold everyone accountable equally, regardless of their wealth. So, things like a lawyer who can devote enough time to your case, things like being able to spend time with your family before a hearing, things like not losing your job, things like not losing your family, things like not experiencing psychological or physical trauma. These are not things that should be considered a good or a commodity that you can just buy. These are things that should be considered rights, basic human rights that every single person should have. And that is where I will continue to explain what the rule of law is and how it's broken today. I have a very quick video that will explain to you what exactly the rule of law is.
The term rule of law is often used in political and economic contexts, but seldom explained. The rule of law is another way of saying that laws, as they are written, are applied equally to everyone. If you break a law, it doesn't matter how wealthy, connected, or powerful you are, you face the consequences. When followed, the rule of law leads to a more just and prosperous society. Civil disputes are more likely to be resolved peacefully. And in business, people are more willing to enter into contracts if they have a high degree of confidence that those contracts will be honored, or that they will be compensated appropriately if they're broken. The rule of law in politics can be seen around the world where there are peaceful transitions of power following elections. It even governs behavior between countries as well, as in the case of World Trade Organization disputes or mutually agreed upon free trade agreements. And while it can be tempting to bend the rule of law in specific instances that seem especially unjust, the benefits to society are maximized when we follow the law as it is written.
So as we see here, the rule of law is very simple to understand, but very hard to put in place. We saw this young man in the video trying to speed away and then holding money up for the officer. The officer quickly brushed that away, as we would hope he would do. However, the bail bond system quickly takes that money and quickly allows for those who maybe they might have tried to pay off a cop and it didn't work. They end up in jail and they're very easily able to pay for their way to get out pay for a great lawyer, and pay for better odds of not ending up in jail versus a person who simply can't pay uh, for those great odds to avoid jail time. However, there is hope. As you see here, all is not lost. There is still one thing that is the key to change. This lies in our judges, who determine bail amounts or determine whether there is even a need for bail in the first place. According to an article found in the Marshall Project, New York City has been experimenting with giving bail that is lower than normal or not giving bail at all in some cases. They have been doing this with nothing but positive results. These judges have found that while normally they would give some people bail, by not giving them bail, it might actually incentivize them to go to court. They have not seen any drop in court attendance since starting to give out lesser amounts for bail or not giving bail at all. So the idea that bail is the only thing that makes people go to court in the first place is completely unfounded. Most people do show up to court, and if they didn't, when they got a reminder, they showed up to court the next time. So, while the rule of law is in bad shape today, it doesn't have to be tomorrow. There is still hope, and that hope lies in our judges. Thank you.